Hey guys, I hope you're all well and keeping well. And I hope this video finds you in good health and in good spirits. There was a huge protest yesterday, a national protest, the far right protest in London. And a lot of things have come out in social media, mainstream media. And it's almost like there's a huge sense of division and there's a huge sense of fear and uncertainty of what the future of Britain will look like. If I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, and again, this is just me giving you my perspective, I'm not here to enforce my view on anyone. In fact, I would actually like it if people disagreed with me in an honorable way without, hurling abuse and exchanging bad words, because it opens a huge space for healthy and honest dialogue. So if people differed with me, that's great. It means we can have a healthy, polite discussion around what I'm going to mention in this video. What's happened with the far right isn't something that's actually new. So it's not really to do with immigration, it's nothing to do with political change, it's not really anything to do with the economy. These are all symptoms of a much deeper underlying question that nobody really actually wants to answer. You see, when a human, a married couple, a community, a town, a village, or an entire nation bounce from one extreme to another, and you see random acts of frustration and violence occurring in all levels of what I've just mentioned, it means that internally there's a turmoil that hasn't been reconciled. There's something deeply inside that's disturbing that human or that married couple or that village or that nation state. In the context of what I'm mentioning in this video, it seems like Britain is going through what I'm getting at, which is an identity crisis. Britain has been going through an identity crisis for so long, but now that the symptoms are really clear, people are actually questioning what's going on. But in fact, this identity crisis started 20, 30 years ago, or even more. In my view, it happened, shortly after the World War subsided and Britain was built again. So I'm going to speak about in this video Christianity, monarchy, the British Empire, religion. I want to speak about how that was replaced with consumerism, individualism, how money and how identity was tied to money, and how self-worth was identified to status and success, and how all of what Britain actually had many years ago has been replaced with things today which have destroyed it, and which is why Britain doesn't know who it actually is today. So yeah, let's get into it now. Christianity. Let's begin with Christianity. Christianity was the shared rhythm and moral code of Britain. So even people who weren't like practicing Christianity, they still lived within a Christian shaped society. So churches sat at the corner of every town and village. Events like Christmas and Easter weren't just formal events. They actually shared deep cultural moments. Marriages had sanctity and weight. They carried deep weight. Values like forgiveness, humility, charity, they all stemmed from the religion of Christianity and Christian influence. So whether someone was fully practicing as a Christian or not, there was still like a shared understanding of belonging and who they were. Then you have the British Empire. The British Empire gave people a sense of collectiveness again. People actually, they genuinely believed that Britain was living for something far greater and bigger than just individuals themselves. You have the famous line and the famous quote saying, "The sun will never set on the British Empire," or something along those lines. So people saw that Britain was actually living for something bigger than itself. Whether it was right or wrong or not, I'm not speaking about that just now. I'm speaking about the fact that people felt connected to something which with a bigger vision than just itself alone. So it was expanding, it was repairing itself, it was developing as a state. So people felt a belonging to something bigger than themselves because Britain wasn't just refined to itself, it was living for something greater. So it gave ordinary people the feeling that Britain was a global influence. Britain was working and contributing towards something greater. So you had soldiers, you had sailors, you had industrial workers, you had politicians, you had teachers. All of these people were coming together for a shared vision to prop up and contribute towards this empire. Then we have, for example, monarchy. The monarchy gave people a sense of emotional stability. And there were certain experiences that come naturally from the monarchy that gave people a shared sense of emotional experience. So, for example, jubilees, weddings, births, funerals, everything that happened from the monarchy 50, 60 years ago, people inherently felt attached to the monarchy here. So it gave them a sense of Britishness. And anyone from the royal family who passed away, they would mourn them as though it is actually their family members passing away. But you know, when members have like passed away in recent times, let's say in the last 5 years, you see that the connection from the British population in comparison to 50, 60 years ago is nowhere as strong as it was, all those times ago. For example, when Princess Diana passed away, it was as though the soul of Britain that day died. So the monarchy was emotionally connected to its people, but you don't see that today. You don't see that at all. And then again, through political changes and global changes, the monarchy again served as a form of security and reassurance for the British people. And then you had the idea of industry, where industry created a sense of honor and dignity and contribution towards Britain. So you had entire towns and cities labeled by particular industries because they took pride in what they did, which served as a contribution towards Britain. For example, steel workers in Sheffield. Sheffield was called Steel City for its mass production of steel. Then you had places like Wales. Wales was known as the country of coal because there were so many coal miners there. Then you had Birmingham. Birmingham was known as like the global factory or the world's factory because all of the different manufacturing it had. So you actually had towns and cities that took pride in their industrial contribution towards something actually bigger. And what this actually done on a social level was quite remarkable because you had a father and son who would maybe be working in the mines together with something bigger than themselves. And this is actually a human fact here. When a bond, whether it's father and son, whether it's marriage, whether it's student and child, whether it's apprentice and teacher, when any of these relationships work outside of a framework bigger than just those two components, those relationships always succeeded. And maybe that's why the problem today is you have family members, you have marriages, you have couples, you have people, because they don't live for something bigger themselves, those relationships don't last because they're not binded in purpose. So father and son would be working in a coal mine, and not only would they be contributing, their social relationship was great. Why? Because they both had a shared vision. They both had a shared national story. They both had shared history. They both had similar heroes, and they both had shared problems. Why? Because after World War, when the country was broken, there was a national story of we need to restore Britain. So sacrifices became one, efforts became one, and vision became one. But over time, those things weakened, and they weakened for the reasons I'm going to mention. But point I'm making now is Britain back then had way more stronger clarity on who they were compared to today. So what replaced all of what I mentioned, Christianity, monarchy, empire, industry, what replaced them was something which didn't create a shared mission amongst people anymore. So instead of the question being, what are we building or what can we build, the question then changed to, what am I building for myself? So all of those values I just explained have been replaced by world-leading ideas and values today. For example, individualism. For example, liberalism. For example, materialism and capitalism. So all of what I mentioned before, we've got the complete opposite of today. So individualism, for example, instead of it being what have we built, it's what can I build for myself? What am I doing for myself? And consumerism, it is, where churches were very, very busy 20 years ago. Shopping malls and, streets that are known for shops and designer brands have become more heavily, visited than churches. But the difference between the church is the church binded the people. Shopping centers don't bind the people. It's only for me, myself, and I. And then social media, it replaced neighborhood connections. You hear stories in UK today where neighbors have passed away and nobody knows about them until they smell the stench of the corpse that's coming out the house. 40, 50 years ago, this wouldn't have happened. Why? Because a digital world, even a digital world with a vision is fine, but a digital world without a shared vision is a catastrophe, because you're only thinking about yourself. To a degree, you don't even know your neighbor's name. You don't even know their problems. You don't even know what's going on. Or you could even maybe hear, because the terrace houses in UK, you can hear what's going on. If something crazy has happened, you don't want to figure out, oh, no, just keep it between yourself. They could be going through hardship. You don't even know why. Again, when you extract a shared purpose and mission from a people, they only live for themselves. And when people live for themselves in a nation, it slowly, slowly fragments and self-destructs from the inside. And that's actually what's happening. So then you have like capitalism. So instead of contributing towards something you take pride in, for example, before it was the empire and global influence and something that they knew was bigger than them, instead of it's like, what are we contributing towards? It's the questions now have changed to who you are instead of who we are. So what do you work as? What car do you drive? Where do you live? Where do you go on holiday? It's all become hyper individualized because there's no shared anchor or purpose anymore. And I'm going to keep repeating this because whenever you have a country or a nation or a town that has a shared mission beyond themselves, you will always find stability in that town or in that entity all the time. You will always find it. So again, because of this self-servicing mindset and everyone sees themselves as their own unit rather than a collective unit, this is why we actually suffer from the social ills and mental health issues and family breakdowns today. Families don't eat together anymore. Families don't check up on each other anymore in a meaningful way unless they have a need from like a parent or a sibling. They don't genuinely think of themselves as a whole nucleus that's working for something bigger. Neighborhoods today shouldn't even be called neighborhoods. They're just estranged places. You could live on your street for 10 years. You don't even know perhaps more than 10, 20 neighbors living on your road or what they're going through. So all of it's declined. And then churches today have become derelict buildings. They're purchased. People get upset, people are buying churches, but why isn't anyone visiting them? Why isn't anyone checking up on their priests or fathers or free? I remember when I was young, my dad had a restaurant 20 years ago, and Christians would come on Sunday to our restaurant. It was actually lovely to host them and look after them and serve them because it gave you an insight into different cultures and religions and perspectives. So you could have healthy exchanges and people can learn from you and you can learn from them. That's not there anymore. Where I live in Luton, I don't see any Christians on a Sunday. I don't see them. And I don't, personally, I'm saying this genuinely, I don't think it's because minorities have taken over. I genuinely believe it's because Christianity doesn't have the holding it once had in the United Kingdom. It's not central anymore. An example of this is 50, 60 years ago, marriage held sacred weight. Honor of a woman held sacred weight. Look at OnlyFans today. Look at OnlyFans today. You have grandchildren from, previous generations who are on OnlyFans doing what they're doing, selling their bodies, nakedness, complete nakedness, so many footages and clips, and they're selling them. Compare that to what Britain was 50 years ago. What is actually Britishness now? What has it become? What actually has it become? It seems like Britain knew what it was so many years ago, and today it's fragmented, it's lost, it doesn't know what it is. I think that's the question that needs to be asked, is before even thinking about politics, before even thinking about bettering the economy, before even thinking about how, we can create more industries and more workflow and how we're going to deal with the immigration issue, before all of that, fundamentally, I think we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Who are we? Who are we? What are we building and what are we working towards? Because now more than ever, there's so much more technology, so many more streams of revenue, so much more opportunities for connectivity via social media and the internet. But I think because a shared mission hasn't been made clear at all, and a shared identity hasn't been made clear at all, it's having the adverse effect of, rather than connectivity, is complete isolation. For example, multiculturalism, this is just another layer of complexity here. There's so many different people living in the UK from different backgrounds, Afro-Caribbean, Asians, South Asians, Central Asians, so many people coming. When they came after World War, why is it that there was more harm? Yes, racism did exist for sure, but why is it that there was more harmony between them and the English British people at the time compared to today? Even though there's no language barrier today, like for example, I'm not actually from England. Originally, I'm from Pakistan, but my shared languages and my taste in food, like I don't know, fish and chips and English tea and full English breakfast. There's more commonalities now on a lower level, but the sad thing is, on a higher level, there's nothing shared. What are we contributing towards? What are we living for? So what happens now is, when there's no shared mission, all these minorities which once lived in harmony have become enemies because of political agendas. And I believe these political agendas come about because they don't want to answer this fundamental question. So again, I'm speaking from my heart, I'm speaking from my mind, that if a nation has lost two things, a shared mission and lost a sense of identity, we are always going to see instability, frustration, violence, hatred, because we haven't actually clarified what we're meant to align on as a nation. And we haven't actually clarified who we are as a people from a sense of identity. So I think if all people from all walks of life and all their backgrounds and all their countries, not actually limited to Britain, by the way, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, I'm speaking about Pakistan, I'm speaking about Egypt, I'm speaking about all countries in the world. If you see turmoil and frustration and violence and, real deep agitation, it's because they don't have a shared mission and they don't know who they are anymore. When a people or a human or a couple or a community answer these two questions, then at least the trajectory is clear. At least they're aligned on what they need to do. Then you can add on economy. Then you can add on revenue. Then you can deal with immigration problems. But if now all we're doing is just firefighting and being reactionary, then we don't want to answer the elephant in the room. If we don't answer the elephant in the room, as a humanity, we're just going to decay and fight until we die, and our whole lives will be spent fighting and bickering and arguing and being violent, rather than trying to make the world a much better place. So that's all I have to say, guys. I hope you found benefit in the video. I was just speaking from my heart and mind, and I'm happy to hear your views, and I'm just only lending this as a perspective. Thank you guys very much. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.